We're still in Tisha B'Av. It didn't get fixed yet. So what I want to talk about a little bit is suffering. And the title given to me was Suffering, Finding the Meaning. I'm going to discuss in this, say, 45 to 50 minute time period, two disparate ideas. One is suffering, how it seems to apply to individuals from a Jewish perspective. And secondly, to discuss the collective suffering of the nation and what brings us here in particular today for Tisha B'Av. I would like to be able to impart, perhaps, I hope, two messages at the end, which will be tools for us to try and use. And today's been hopefully a day of some tools as well as some reflection for us. I will not be going into the depths, I'm not going to plumb the depths of Jewish understanding for suffering, and there is a lot to say. The Talmud is not afraid and doesn't mince words when it wants to tell you how we deal with the issues of suffering in our life. But nonetheless, I'm going to keep it relatively simple, and for those people who have questions at the end, I'd be very happy to take them when we finish the moment together. Okay, so let's start now. Okay, the nature of the day. If one looks behaviorally at what Tisha B'Av is, we are struggling. What do I mean? It means we don't bathe, we don't eat, we don't cohabit, we don't put on perfumes. For the first part of the day, and last night into today until Chatzot, until noontime, so to speak, we did not greet one another. Number of actions that we performed and that we did not perform that were difficult for us, that made a difficult day. And in fact, most people, both from those who are knowledgeable in Judaism, those who are not, will come to admit that Tisha B'Av is one of the hardest days to fulfill in a real sense. And we know that for one reason. We know that because there is a Gemara that teaches us that should it be that the Jewish people would do the right thing, the temple would be rebuilt, and that every generation, and everyone has heard this today at least once, every single generation that did not rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, it is tantamount to as if they were there, they would have been the generation that would have destroyed it. We didn't fix it yet. We didn't learn our lesson as a collective nation, I should add. Important to say that. So what can we learn? What about this nature of this day that's afflictions and difficulty and mourning? So I had a friend of mine in Yerushalayim who is a teacher talk about this idea many years ago when I spoke to him, that just as we can view life as a method of optimizing pleasure, we can view the 5 levels of pleasure, so too in Tisha B'Av we can focus on the 5 levels really of misery. It is misery to a certain sense that we're not in touch with what the greatest aspects of who we are supposed to be are. So for example, the highest level that a Jew should wish for in their life would be attachment to the Almighty. Knowing God, feeling God, and having a sense for what God is, having a relationship, and a real one at that. That's the highest level. Highest level of misery is to live in a world where you're being told, yeah, there's a God. You know, those religious Jews over there, they believe in a God. They do. But you don't know. And you don't feel it. And you feel morally relative. Maybe it's all the same. It's all equal. That's misery. Misery of power. You know, normally power and creativity are wonderful forces. And yet sometimes we feel this terrible counter. We feel powerless. Or it's a terrible, evil power, not a power to create goodness, but to create evil. Meaning, we live in a world where it's hard sometimes to find the meaning. Or people find multiple meanings, but they don't find the right meaning. How do we know what the real meaning is? So we can see here for every positive that a person can ascribe to, there can be negative. Love. Living in a world where there's less than appropriate love. Loveless world. It's one of the issues that we have to raise, the issue of loving our fellow Jew, for example, which I will discuss in a little while. And finally, pleasure, physical pleasure. Okay, the lowest level of physical pleasure. There are many severe counterfeits in this world for what constitutes pleasure, and the overuse of pleasure, and addictions, which is an area that I know too much about. So the levels of misery mean that when we're not focused on what's good about life, we'll focus on what's not good. And we live in a time where God's presence is not so obvious. And because God's presence isn't so obvious, we struggle terribly. So we want to talk about suffering. I just made mention of suffering. We're in a day where we, to some degree, have some suffering inherent in the day. Okay? We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But I want to make the point that there are both sufferings on a personal level, a personal nature. There's the individual and the struggles that an individual has in their life, the hurts they have, and how one bears with this discomfort, pain. What do we call suffering? We can call it different types of euphemisms and hurts and pain, depression. We can call it opportunities. We can call it challenges. We have different ways we can frame what suffering is. And we have collective suffering. We have a nation that has to suffer. We had Bulgaria. It wasn't on Tisha B'Av, but we might as well talk about it on Tisha B'Av. We have collective hurts that are ongoing through history. We'll see many of them had their origins in Tisha B'Av. Okay, but we'll talk first about personal suffering. And I'm going to gloss through because the focus of my discussion today will not just be on personal, but will be on collective suffering and collective reparation, as we'll see. Okay, personal suffering. I'd like to bring as my example Rabbi Elisha ben Abulia. This gentleman was a great Tana. He was a great rabbi of the Talmud. He was a brilliant and great man. Our Midrashim tell us he went into a place of tremendous esoteric knowledge and did not come out whole in his deep studies. He saw a young boy, so the story goes, climbing up a little ladder. What for? To shoo away a mother bird who was sitting on eggs. This in Hebrew is called shaluach hakan. It is a mitzvah that is what we can call a supra-rational mitzvah. It's not a rational mitzvah, it's above the rational plane. It's not one that makes sense. There are mitzvahs in the Torah that are not rational. They're above that. An infinite God speaks to a finite man and says, these are rules of living. And you'll get most of them, but you're not necessarily going to get all of them because they're mine. They're not yours. So as the story goes, he climbs up the ladder. He's going to shoo away the mother bird and take the egg, for which the Torah tells us that there will be a reward of long life. Sounds like a good reward. When the boy climbs up, unfortunately, lo aleinu, it happens. He fell and he killed himself. He died. Rabbi Elisha ben Abulia was absolutely devastated. How can the Torah promise long life, and this boy does this beautiful task for the right reason, and he dies? This makes no sense to me. How did Rabbi Elisha ben Abulia deal with his, what we call in psychological terms, cognitive dissonance? That he has to come to reconcile his terrible feelings that don't make sense to him. What does he do? He comes to the conclusion that God is not just, that God is not all-powerful, not just, and he becomes a disbeliever, a heretic of the highest order, I should add. And it's a long story with actually, interestingly, many turns and a beautiful ending in a certain sense. In the end, the evil Acher, who becomes the alter ego of Rabbi Elisha ben Abulia, ends up going to heaven in the very end from the tremendous work done from his students who never gave up on him. So there's a beautiful story embedded in the story, but I have to leave that for time. But I'll tell you, what's this about? What do we learn? We learn, number one, as I said earlier, a couple of minutes earlier, the Talmud does not mince words in talking about difficult issues. And the issue of tzaddik v'ralo, that a person could be a very righteous person and bad things can happen to them, that people can suffer, is not a discussion that's been pushed away in the Gemara. We don't pretend it didn't happen. We don't pretend that people don't suffer. We don't pretend that this perception is not there. And even the more so, the Almighty gives us an emotional set. He gives us a brain with all kinds of connections that allow for emotive feelings, and sometimes feelings of pain and hurt. It is not a denial of the physiology that God gave us, that the Almighty wants from us. He gave us the ability to cry, and He gave us the ability to be angry, and He gave us the whole of the emotional range for reasons. Nonetheless, we see here that we have to come to explain suffering, and we see on a personal level that Rabbi Elisha ben Abulia could not accept it. So my teachers tell me that yes, this was not an intellectual decision that he made. It was an emotional decision. He could not deal with the emotional pain. And we have to remember this, by the way, for ourselves, that sometimes terrible things that happen can evoke incredible pain. And a person has to know for themselves, when they have pain, do they want answers? Do they want pain relief? It's very different. Pain relief and answers are very different. Everyone in this room knows, and I'm sure they all know it, that when you go to a shiva for someone who's had someone pass away, an untimely death for somebody, right? When you go in, you know what your role is. Everyone knows here. I'm going to tell you what you know. You know, when you go in there, you're there for pain relief. You're there to sit with them. If you can cry, you'll cry with them, if that's what's necessary. And you're going to give a message. I care for you, and I love you, and I'm here for you. And you are intrinsically good, even if you feel bad for what happened. Okay? Pain relief, mostly. But there are some times where answers are required. So I'm going to try and pretend, and I pretend in the short time that I have to give a few quick answers, and I admit it's a very sketchy moment, but just enough to hopefully whet your appetite and allow you the ability to ask more questions. Remember, sometimes the class's purpose is not for you to remember anything, and the class's purpose is not for you to have a full rundown of every single answer, but at least it'll help you to generate the proper questions that you can ask the Torah authorities for, that you can get answers for. Okay? So I'll give you some ideas. An infinite God has a plan for the universe. A finite human being is not aware of the details of that plan. And in that little small idea is encapsulated this whole idea that a person can suffer, but the suffering is not without an ultimate, and it's not without a meaning. So we feel emotively that if something happens, if I stub my toe and it hurts, and I cry, what was that for? It was for nothing. That's not what we say. We say that suffering has a reason and has a value to me and a value to the universe, because it's generated from the Almighty. That's what we say. Now that's a mouthful. I don't think if a person has personal pain that you may necessarily feel that. Okay? You may not necessarily agree with that, because after all, that's too much. That's too much for me. How can I know that? And how am I supposed to live with that? So we know that when people have things happen to them, the Almighty sends for multiple reasons. These reasons are discussed in the Gemara in different places. And there isn't one reason. Sometimes the reason, and this is the obvious reason, and by no means the only or the most important reason, sometimes things happen because I make mistakes. The word chet, sin, avera, avon, posheya, they're all different terms describing different strengths of sins, and different sins with different types of motivation. So there is one view, an important view, that sometimes the record is going to be cleaned down here. That when you make a mistake that you're going to have to pay for it. The Almighty says, I reward you for all of your good. You can be guaranteed, according to traditional understanding, that every little bit of good that you do will get reinforced and will be rewarded in the world to come. That God doesn't miss a trick, and He doesn't miss a moment, He doesn't miss anything. So anything and everything that you've done that's good in your life, you'll get rewarded for, no question. Now, you don't know when, you don't know what, but don't worry, that's there for you. But every single mistake you make, that also doesn't go away. We don't have a view of a God that goes like this. He doesn't see us. He sees. He waits for us to change. He's patient. I will refer you to a very beautiful book of Musar in Hebrew called Tomer Devara, the Poems of Devara, which is a wonderful book which deals with God's patience. How patient is He really? Unbelievably so. But nonetheless, there's payment for mistakes. We have to pay that price. It's sad to hear it. But God is a just God. He is also a kind and a merciful God. And He balances. Nonetheless, when we make mistakes, as the Gemara says in Brachas, a person should check their actions. If a person has something happen to them, if they have suffering, if something hurts, they should check their actions. Say that clearly. You say that sins are going to be paid. And some of them will be paid in this world. How should you view that? It's not fair. Life is very difficult to begin with. I don't want more pain in this world. I have enough, thank you. But we know that anything you pay in this world, you're not going to pay in the next world. So it becomes incumbent on a person to recognize that if there is a God, and if this God is a God who is all-knowing, all-seeing, independent of time, created the universe ex nihilo from nothing, then you can understand that that same God is going to be able to keep score for you. And we all make mistakes. There's nobody who is perfect. down here. We all make mistakes. So that you can ask your questions. Now, if it's about mistakes, okay, so this is how I have to deal with it, that I have to have this pain now, so I won't have it later. That's one positive take on what suffering is in this world, is clarification and purification. That's one. It's not the only one. Sometimes we pay prices for our grandparents and parents. There is an idea like that. There are times that we will pay for what other people have done. Sometimes it's not about payment. Sometimes it's something that righteous people get. We call it a love tap, although that's a euphemistic term, a love tap. But nonetheless, there are such things as a love tap. God says, I love you, I'm going to give you another challenge, because I know you can handle it. And of course, everyone in the room, when you hear that, you go, well, no, you don't get it. I can't handle it. Because that's not how most of us feel when we get over our head. We feel that the suffering is more than we can endure. But nonetheless, God says, yeah, you just wait and see it through to the very end. Because in the very end, you would have been able to endure it. And you'll have grown from it. Things will accrue that will be good for you. I gave it to you because I love you, not because I hate you. The great rabbis of our generation, and the great people of our generation, and the quiet people that we don't even know their greatness is, often get suffering. And their suffering is actually something that expiates a generation. We say that the death of a righteous person may very well be an expiation for a generation. And although we should be careful, because some of our non-Jewish brethren have taken this idea to an extreme, as we know, that Christians will say that Jesus died for our sins. There is such an idea. Therefore, that expiation is automatic carte blanche for some people through all the generations. We say, sorry, that ain't the case. Every person has to fix their own way. All of us in this room have to do our own work to become better. Nonetheless, there is such an idea that great people's leaving this world is also kapara, or covering over, a fixing up of some of the pain of this world. So we do have this idea. Okay, maybe one or two more that we'll talk about. Okay, we have an idea that you could have a suffering for something that you might do in the future. Since the Almighty knows all of time, and you don't, the Almighty can send you a struggle or a problem because of something you're going to do 10 years from now. But so He's clearing your record in advance. Okay, now you might learn from that record, from that moment, from that painful moment, and perhaps 10 years you won't even make that mistake that you're going to make. But He knows you're going to make that mistake, so He sends you challenges even in advance. What do we have here, just to summarize this brief idea and try and put it into a small place, is that if you have an infinite Almighty who wants to give you good, but is also going to tell you as a human being that yes, you're going to have to pay for the mistakes you make, because that's the nature of reward and punishment, and that is the nature of mankind, and that's the nature of Jews who do mitzvahs in particular, then you have to know that the infinite will find many ways to make His point known. And sometimes it may not be about you at all, not your past, not your present, not your future, not about your previous family, but it may be because the Jews in that generation unfortunately needed it. And you were caught with those Jews who need the suffering. You were caught because you were in that spot, lived in that town, in that place. In other words, God has so many different reasons, and we want to know all of them. And we won't be satisfied if we don't know them. And if you walk away from the class and you don't know exactly your reasons, then what good was that class? It was nothing, because it didn't give me what I needed. We don't always get exactly what we need. What we know is that things either have reason or no reason. We are either living in it's a binary world. There is either a God or no God. There isn't half a God. There are very few people who subscribe to the message that was once given by a conservative rabbi many years ago when his daughter died. Many years ago. This is a gentleman named Harold Kirzner, and he wrote a book in the midst, I'll give him credit, if I give him credit, in the midst of his anger and pain and hurt. But, that really, God is impotent, okay? Why bad things happen to good people? Why? His answer, I'm just sharing it in the book so you don't have to read it, because God's impotent to stop everything that occurs in the world. He's not all-powerful after all. We thought He was all-powerful and created a world from nothing, but now we found out He wasn't. He can't stop illness. Can't stop cancer. So a Torah Jew says, sorry, very nice, okay, and I'm not trying to say negative about the person, because that's not what Jews do with Jews. We're all family, we're all brethren. I want to be clear about it. I'm not at all suggesting a negative aspect for this poor man who lost a child, and God forbid, and I don't know what I would do. But I would say like this, we have to understand the ideas. So I will do my battle with the idea to say that God, who can create a universe from nothing, is not going to have a problem in looking after individuals in this world, okay, then we don't understand God, that's all. We don't understand how powerful God is. Then we can say that. The fact is, God is powerful. He has a reason. God brings every soul into the world, and at the times that are appropriate for ways I could not know, He takes it out. God gives us a fracture when we need one. We don't know why sometimes, and sometimes we do. And so, searching actions, looking into yourself, is one of the issues for the individual who is confronted by hurt and pain. Look into yourself. What can you learn? Can you be sure that you know what God had in store for you? There are different opinions in this matter. Okay, there are different rabbis who will posit different opinions as to whether you can know the details or not. If we take the ideas given by, say, Rabbi Yehuda Levi, he'll, for one example on this other side I'll give you, he'll say, no, you can't always know. Sometimes it's direct hashgach, it's direct intervention from God into this world, that you get what you get, and sometimes not. That there's a room for randomness even in the world, although God runs everything. That's one view. It's one view of one great rabbi. There are other great rabbis that might say differently. But what we can know is that when we are confronted by what we don't know, we do have options. We run from the pain, or we accept the pain. Really, that's a choice. If we run from the pain, you can come join me in my office, because I do a lot of addiction work. In addiction work, some of the classic theory behind why people have addictions is a response to pain, a response to hurt. And they can't take the response directly. So they go around it by doing many different things. I can think of 10 different things they could do to try and alleviate some of the discomfort. And once they keep doing those things in a repetitive, obsessive fashion, then those things take a life of their own. And now we have what we call addiction. That's one of the theories of addiction. That's not the only one. There's a couple, but that's one of them. So the point is, when people can't cope and deal with pain, they end up sometimes doing things that are not so functional. So a Jew has an option to either view the world as either being run by the Almighty or not. Either my pain is randomness, it's hurtful for no good reason, or it's sent by God Almighty for a reason. So let me finish up this idea and go into the collective, as I should. Number one, I didn't tell you why you have your pain. And it can come for multiple reasons. And those reasons are important to you, and they shouldn't be minimized. And anyone who has a spiritual sense will want to ask their spiritual connections as to why that should be. But we say that pain has meaning, okay? Ultimate meaning. It's not for nothing. There's nothing you get that hurts that doesn't have a reason. Number two, if you don't agree with the first one, fine, we can fight it quietly. You'll come up afterwards. Number two, pain causes growth. Pain does something to people. You see people who have pain, they grow and they become more mature. And they learn often how to cope with this. So I'm not talking about my group of people who struggle with pain and end up doing things they shouldn't do. But among those people who figure out that they have to make something of it, they become great. How many people who've had a cancer, who are in cancer survival groups, who are counseling people on how to survive, exist? How many people have gone through terrible things in their life, and they take positions of leadership as human beings to help other people get through their pains? It is unbelievable that we see this, and we see it on a regular basis. So we should never think that if you have pain or something happens to you, that it's for nothing. Who knows from who you're going to have to share that experience with in later years? Who knows what you're going to teach and who you're going to teach about why you went through what you went through and how valuable it was and how down the road you're going to save somebody because of what you experienced. So this is the point, that these things are for a reason. It's not for nothing. And it's for us to figure out what to do and what to make of it. And that I'm going to now slowly turn into Tisha B'Av now and start to try and make this more real. So he said that there's individuals who have pain and it hurts, and we have a nation of Jews who've had a history of pain that is, I think we could say, unenviable. Okay, it's too much. We have a world of pain. We've gone through it. So let's talk about a little bit of this now. So Tisha B'Av is a day also of suffering. We have a paradigm from the Torah, and I want to review some of these ideas. Okay, the first paradigm I want to review is just really from the Parsha Shalach. This is the Parsha of the spies. From where are we all sitting here today? How did this happen? Why are we sitting together in Tisha B'Av? Why you're in my class at 5 o'clock? That's the question. I don't know. But you're here. Why? Why are we here? What is Tisha B'Av? The Jewish people were about to go into the land of Israel. They were ready. They did an 11-day journey in 3 days miraculously to get to the point at which they could go and enter the land. But they asked Moshe Rabbeinu, no, we don't want to go in right now. We'd rather send some spies to go in on our behalf and see what the land is like. And I'm just truncating the story, as people know. These spies were the top. They were not small people. They were the greats of Israel. They're the leaders of the tribes. These were not small people with small minds and small hearts. And they came in, they saw the land. They objectively, and I use the word objectively, saw what was there, not subjectively. They were objective. They saw the truths of the country. And they came back and they gave over the truths of the country in such a way that the Jewish people said, forget it. We can't do this. We're not going to be able to go in. They did not lie. They didn't say anything that was false or phony. They said it like it was, so to speak. But above all, they said that it can't be done. It can't be done. We can't go in there. Okay? So, what happened? What was the response? And what would be my response? And what would be the response of all of us in the room if we were there? And these leaders of the country come by, and they say, 10 out of 12 that is, say, it can't be done. There's giants and monsters there. The land eats its inhabitants. They went there at a time that they saw a plague. People were dying left, right, and center. Well, of course, God sent it. He sent it deliberately to make sure that there'd be a subterfuge so they wouldn't be caught. But they didn't see it that way. They saw it as a land that was not winnable. And 2 out of 12, and we know Joshua, and Caleb ben Yefuneh, both of those two people did in fact see. And did say, the land is ma'od ma'od, it's very good. Don't listen to those words, because even if they're truthful to a degree, they're not truthful in entirety. Why weren't they truthful in entirety? It's important to understand this for this moment and for what I'm going to say coming up in 30 seconds. Because yes, it was a tough place with giants. And yes, it was going to be a tough job. But if God took them this far, He could take them all the way. That's the simple, it's easy for us armchair quarterbacks of history to look back on our brethren and say, how could you do that? You just got out of Egypt, miracle after miracle after miracle. You're going through the desert. You're being maintained at all times in a miraculous way. You're not being bitten by scorpions, thank you. Okay? And your clothes aren't wearing out. And you're living there, and you're having a miraculous existence. What are you talking about? So listen to what it says. It says, Vayhu ha'am v'laylahu. The nation cried at that night. They cried. That was their response. Now, it's true that when you learn Torah, you have to remember to personalize your Torah. What's the Torah telling me about me? Because that's why you're learning Torah, to learn about yourself. So the question, they cried that night. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So, and this is from the Torah Tamima, which is a very nice book that lists Talmudic ideas from every line in the Torah. So, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rava, this famous rabbi, said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Oso Laila Leil Tisha B'Av Haya. That night that they cried was the night of Tisha B'Av. Amar Lahem, he said to them, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, God said to them, Atem Bechitam Bechia Shalchinam. You cried a free cry, a cry that was unnecessary, a cry that was not about the truth of the situation. Yes, it's objectively true. These are giants there. And it's not true that I can't take you in. You cried for nothing. Okay? And I will affix for you a time of crying for the generations. And that's from Tanis. So what's the point? The point is God Almighty set this day. He said it because we cried when we didn't need to cry. Okay? That's the collective. A day of crying. But you see, God says, if I set a day of crying for you, for eternity, you will really cry in those days. You will cry. I will make you cry. And He does. Okay? So that we understand that this is a paradigm. This today, Tisha B'Av, the reason that we're here, the reason that we talk, we're going to talk about the temple in a minute, because that's where I'm taking our discussion. So the reason that we're here right now is because the Almighty said this will be a day of crying. And as my son very beautifully said, that tears can be good. We can fix things. Okay? That we can make it better. We know what to cry for, and we cry, and we really cry, whether it's on the inside or the outside. We can make life better for ourselves. We can fix ourselves. We can fix the world. So the crying's not for nothing. God didn't say you're going to cry for nothing, necessarily. He said, you cried for nothing today, so I'm going to make you cry. But He's not that cruel. God says you cry properly, and you can fix your problems, then the world gets better. Okay, so therefore we have to learn something, is what I want to tell you. So the sin of the spies we talked about. The nation cries, a day of crying forever. And sure enough, we have, through history, and this is a very nice H page from many years ago. If people want it, I don't know why you'd want it, but this is a list, a litany of times that we cried as a nation on Tisha B'Av in particular. Okay, the first temple was destroyed 486 BC by the Babylonians, and the second one was 69 AD by the Romans. Okay, Bar Kokhba rebellion was with Tisha B'Av. 100,000 people died. We have Turnus Rufus plows the site of the temple, Tisha B'Av. A city, I just read on this, Aelia Capitolina, which was really a Roman city, was built in the old city of Jerusalem proper. There's actually a map by the excavations that exist now showing how the 10th Legion of Rome actually sat. They had the armies there. The armies were there until maybe about 200 of the Common Era, before finally Rome fell apart totally. But the fact is, we can actually see historically this new city that was created, which is a pagan city, on top of Jerusalem, the holy old city of Jerusalem. 1095, the First Crusade started. Yes, Tisha B'Av, Pope Urban II. We were massacred in so many cities at that point. 1290, time of Cromwell, expulsion of Jews from England was Tisha B'Av. The Inquisition in Spain and Portugal, 1492. There was a very clear story that one of the greatest of the Portuguese financiers, Don Barbanel, who was the head advisor for the King and Queen, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, he at that time was given an option. Stay, we need you here. They said, no way, you're kicking out the Jews, you're forcing them to either to become Christians, right? That's what the Inquisition was all about, or die, or leave. Well, if they're leaving, I'm leaving. And in fact, on Tisha B'Av in 1492, Don Barbanel, this famous rabbi and financier, allowed for a band to play as the Jews were marching out of Portugal. You can imagine what that would be like. And I don't even think anyone really could imagine. You can't imagine the Canadian government saying, okay, get out of here. You have no place to go. There's no Israel now. And we're taking all your money. We're going to take everything from you. And you're going to go out and you're going to leave. And it's Tisha B'Av. And they're playing a band. You can imagine what was going through people's minds, those people who understand historically what was going on. Yet again, so 1492, powerful. 1914, the beginning of World War I, was on Tisha B'Av. Okay, and so on, there's more. But the point I'd like to make is, and I just want to get this as a clear idea, that we have to come now to understand some things. Okay, 1492, whether it was Chmelnytsky, whether it was any of the pains or hurts, any of the killers, murderers of history, or the times as a nation we are threatened, the Almighty sent us these threats, and He often sent them at on Tisha B'Av. Okay, so question mark: what are we mourning for? We have to answer that question. Okay, we really do. What brought about this loss? Okay, and what are we going to do to fix it? And I'm going to spend about 20 minutes, and then I'm going to finish. Okay, and I want to go through those three ideas. Okay, so I'm now switching from the individual mourning moment and suffering and pain and hurt to collective. We're Jews, we're all family, we're all here today. We're all looking for solutions, if there are any. And I will want to suggest a couple of them. I will suggest them briefly at the end. So what are we mourning for, Tisha B'Av? We're mourning for the fact, right, that we lost the temple, right? And the temple was destroyed on Tisha B'Av. But I want to give you some of the ideas about what mourning really is, okay? I'm going to give you an idea. I've read this in my life maybe 30 times, 40 times, could be even more. I'm just throwing that number out on Tisha B'Av afternoon. And I only got it this year. It sounds terrible. But at least that should give everyone hope that if you keep learning Torah, different beautiful ideas will come into your mind as you get older. Beautiful ideas that are meaningful and good. So that don't feel if you read something the first time you got it. Just have some optimism that you keep rereading it and keep relearning it and know more and more. So look what it says here. Moshe Rabbeinu is giving rebuke to the Jewish people that they caused that terrible night with the sin of the spies and the fact that the Jews were not going to be allowed into Israel at that time. It was a terrible punishment that was meted. Okay? But you did not wish to ascend, and you rebelled against the word of Hashem your God. You slandered in your tents and said, because of Hashem's hatred for us, did He take us out of the land of Egypt, to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us. To where shall we ascend? Our brothers have melted our hearts, saying, a people greater and taller than we, cities great and fortified to the heavens. and even children of giants have we seen there. Then I said to you," this is Moshe speaking to the Jewish people, "do not be broken and do not fear them. Hashem your God who goes before you, He shall make war for you, like everything He did for you in Egypt before your eyes." So the answer that I gave you a few minutes ago about the mistake, it's right there. It's right in the Torah. I mean, if we read the Torah and take this as a literal, we had the answer. Let's go on. Okay, let's go on. "And in the wilderness, as you have seen that Hashem your God bore you as a man carries his son, on the entire way that you traveled until you arrived at this place." Punchline. "Yet in this matter you do not believe in Hashem your God." So the fact of the matter is, Moshe Rabbeinu comes and hits us right between the eyes. He hit his people between the eyes. Now who is he speaking to? Let's just be clear. He's speaking to two groups of people. He's speaking to the nation who are the children of those Jews that were not allowed to go into Israel. And he's speaking to me. Okay? Remember, the Torah doesn't speak historically. It's a book about every Jew. It's a book about history, about every moment. It's a book about the past, present, and future. The Torah teaches me. I've now learned one terrible mistake that the Jewish people made. They had a lapse, a huge lapse in their belief that the Almighty had the power to take them out and look after them. And by the way, if you know the Torah well, so you know that sure enough, 2 days later, they came back to their senses and said, no, we're with you, God. We believe. We're good. We're going to go. We're going to do it. Moshe said, sorry, this ain't the time. You lost your moment. That's like a kid who tantrums, whatever, like, in the store and goes crazy, and you got to take him out of the store, and at home they're smiling and saying, "I'm okay now. Can we have the candy?" No. Sorry, you missed your moment. Okay, that's sorry. You can't go back sometimes. That's what happened. They tried to go back, they tried to climb the mountain, and they were killed because God was in fact not with them at that point. What's the message? This message has to be important because we're going to talk about, right now, the temple. We're going to talk about the fact that we made mistakes. We talked about that when we made mistakes, we also make mistakes, and we have to know that. Okay, so let's go on. I'm going to change gears. I'm going to talk about what are we mourning for? What are we suffering about? What is the Jew of history suffering about now? I want to make this an understanding. We're going to talk about the temple. And you should know that we have a right to talk about many things. The temple was a very high level of spirituality for the Jewish people. And I'm just going to give this as an aside to whet your appetite for later, for another time. But we had higher levels of spirituality. This wasn't it. This was not the highest level of spirituality. Having a temple was a response to a mistake, according to many opinions. The mistake was the golden calf. Right, so we needed to fix the mistake of the golden calf, according to many opinions. And we had the temple. Well, we see through history a sinusoidal curve in the Jewish people when it comes to the divine presence or the Shekhinah. What do we see? We see many, many times that the Shekhinah is with us and away, with and away. The tents of the patriarchs, so the wives of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, when they were around, the Shekhinah was in the tent. And I want to tell you that people like me, who would like to tell you all about the Shekhinah, cannot, because we don't experience it. When a person talks about what they don't regularly experience, they should be very honest to say that we don't experience it. Have I, in my life, experienced special moments? Yes. But do I experience them regularly? All the time? No. And yet we did. The forefathers had, on the merit of their wives, the Shekhinah in the tent. In Egypt, in the exile, Shekhinah is gone. There's no sense of divine presence in the exile. Okay, we lose it again. Then, what happens? After the revelation at Har Sinai, once we reach and get the Torah at Mount Sinai, the Shekhinah comes back again. We are at an incredible level. To live forever at that level. It was unbelievable where we were. But we blew it again. Okay? We're supposed to keep the Shekhinah forever. We were going to be transformed. We were a special nation in a way that was unexplainable. That the person of lowest level had a greater spiritual stature than the highest of the prophets did. The little window washer person had a higher, greater spirituality in them. We don't get it. Because if you think that you understand it, you probably don't. But you have to know that you had it. That's the point I'd like to teach today. You have to know that you did have that spirituality in you. Okay? We lost with the golden calf. Okay? So what happened? Well, how did we get it back? It came back to the Jewish people when we had the temple again. So the temple was a restoration of the Shekhinah, of this presence that we've had throughout our history, on and off. Okay, that's how special that was. So what happens? What are we trying to do here? What are we trying to accomplish? A person who mourns for Jerusalem and mourns for the destruction of the temple will be able to have spiritual merit and to benefit when it comes back again. And we say it will come back. We will one day have the Shekhinah back. So we're mourning for this incredible loss. But what is this loss? What is it? This is a place, the temple, where God was revealed. Not only that, it was a place where one could feel Torah. And we have a problem on our hands. At least people like me who are ersatz learners. You know, I'm not the most observant of observant, but I learn Torah most days if I can, and I believe in it and I endorse it. So I look, Thornhill, if you're in the Torah type of world of Thornhill, you know, on a given night, you can go to that rabbi and that rabbi and that rabbi, that shul, and you'll find it's a whole bunch of people learning. It's beautiful from a person like me who loves Torah to see how much Torah is being learned and lived. So what are we missing? We got good old Thornhill. We got lots of Torah. It feels nice. We have a wonderful community. And I'm talking about all the communities of Thornhill, not one little community here. I'm talking about as a community. We have an open community. It's a nice place to live. It's a very good place. We are so fortunate. I don't know if we ever think about how fortunate we are. But nonetheless, we have the synagogues, we have people with mikvahs, we have lots of places for Torah schools. We got it all. So what's the problem? The problem is I don't know what to mourn for, because I think I have it. That's one of the problems. It's all here. I want to live a Jewish life. You got the books, you got the rabbis. If you want to ask questions, they'll answer them. In other words, you have all. So now, what's the problem? The problem is that we don't recognize that this is a pale imitation of what it really is. This is one of the hardest things for me to explain, and I've tried. You've heard me in the class many times talking about the fact that the incredible shrinking Jew, that over time, we don't know who we are. We don't know our grandeur. We don't know how special. The world reminds us of our special nature because we're always in the news. Because we can't do anything right. Because the world points every second at us. You, this, you, that. Ongoing. When will we get the message that there must be some reason outside of the rational, i.e. spiritual, in other words, that the world points at us all the time? Because they do. Why do they? The fact of the matter is we don't appreciate what we've lost. And therefore what we have is just a shadow of the strength of what really God's Torah is and what God's relationship to us is. We're exiled. We're gone. We don't feel it. We don't sense it. And yet, because people like me are in observant circles where I live my life, I think, well, it's good. I go to learn. I'm happy. And I like the rabbis. They say some really great things. And I feel really good. I give some tzedakah. I feel good and do the things I do. Make my mistakes that I make. Try and do the things good that I can. But we don't get it. We're in a world of assimilation. We're in a world where it's watered down, that we don't even know what it was like. So let me give you a few ideas about what we're missing. Okay? And I say it's just a few ideas. And my son beautifully said this in the morning. I'm going to share some and give some others. So first things first. We miss a close relationship to the Almighty. There's a famous rabbi now living in Arizona. I think he was in Jerusalem. And he talked about the fact that the temple was something like Canada's Wonderland. It was a place of craziness. The laws of gravity, the laws of physics stop applying inside that place. What's that mean? The windows are made such that, not that light comes in, that's how windows are supposed to be made, light comes in, right? No, the light goes out. Now don't ask me how that is, because I won't give you a rational answer, because I wasn't there. But it was made in such a way that all kinds of crazy things happened in there. And then when you went there, you saw God. Because you saw the disruption of the normal laws of physics when you went there. And you saw miracles, okay? And you felt close to God. And when you went there and you had an offering, and you went and the Kohen would help share your offering, he would actually grill you. The psychologist, you're going to the psychologist, the shrink, he's going to grill you about your life and your motivations and why you did what you did and what you did wrong and why do you want to bring this and what was the mistake about. He says, no, you got the wrong thing. You need to bring this. This isn't right. Oh no, you can't bring that. Why? Because you don't feel guilty about it. But the point is, you're going to go through a grilling. But who's grilling you? A Kohen. And the Kohen loves you. and He wants the best for you. And He says, please, Chaveri, Ishi, please, my man, you can't do that. And you're starting to get emotionally worked up. And as you're getting emotionally worked up, and you've made a mistake, and you go to a place where miracles are occurring, and you put your hand on this animal, and this animal is going to be offered, and suddenly this blood comes out, and suddenly you say, it could have been me, and suddenly you go, whoa, you get transformed. When you want your kids to become observant, you didn't send them for 20 years to Eitz Chaim and hope for the best, okay, or elsewhere. Okay, what did you do? You took them to the temple. Because when they saw God at the temple, you didn't have to explain it to them in longhand. You didn't have to say, we are people that believe in the Torah and the mitzvahs, and we believe in Hashem. They say, why are you telling me about what I already see? The kids saw God. They knew God. We don't have such a fortunate thing. They became closer. Going to Jerusalem just by itself increased people's wisdom. Okay, remember, light. It's a bright place. You had the menorah inside the temple. Going to the temple by itself, to the Beis Hamikdash, made you wise. For no other reason. Just by going. For nothing else. You became wise. Okay? And confusion and sort of this darkness that we live in dissipated. Okay? We see here that the knowledge, when the temple was destroyed, the great rabbis, the amount of knowledge went down. That the great rabbi scholar became really the level of a teacher. That a teacher became the level of a student. That a student became the level of... And if we say that there's a watering down of the knowledge that occurred after the temple was destroyed, you can imagine today, 2,000 years later, people like me, like this, know nothing about nothing. And yet, I'm bidden to articulate the little that I know for you. But the fact is, the great knowledge has gone down. The expression is Yeridas Adoros, the decrease, the decrement in each and every generation of knowledge. And yet we hold on to our rabbis, and we hold on to our Torah nonetheless. Okay? Okay? We knew God was there. We saw miracles, as I mentioned. People had a high level of trust, even though they weren't perfect in what they did, because they saw it. And then there's another set of ideas, that when the temple was destroyed, the whole level of physicality of the world shifted. There's a Gemara, and I don't remember where it says it, but if the Gentiles only knew what was going to happen to the world by the destruction of the temple, they would have sent armies of guards to prevent anything bad from happening to it. There's such a medrash, okay, such an idea. And that's what we see. The sky became less blue when the temple was destroyed. The fruits became less tasty. Again, I'm quoting from the Gemara, okay? The Nofis Tzutim, which was an incredibly type of fine flour that made the showbread. The showbreads were always fresh. Never not fresh. We don't understand that, You make challah, you leave it up for a day or two. Nah. You put it in the freezer, burn. Okay, but there you had stuff. Not my wife's stuff. But the point is that we had these fine breads that were lost to us. We no longer know what this beautiful taste is like. Okay? The last one. That when you went to the temple and you made a mistake, as we all make, you at the temple become immediately aware of the consequences of your actions. Okay? If there's a plague, something happens, no rain, providence was clearer. Hashgacha, God's actions in the world were much clearer. You knew when you were wrong. In our generation, what happens when we think we're wrong? We quickly switch to high gear. Now we're right. I'm right. The other person was wrong. And now you have your rationale and all your reasons and all you worked it out and blah, blah, blah. They were wrong. This is how we live. We live in such a society. We imbibe that. Whereas you went to the temple, you knew you're wrong. You're wrong. Oopsie, I blew it. I made terrible mistakes. Okay, got to deal with it. Should we not cry in our own mind's eye for the fact that we can't even relate to what this would be like? You get beautiful fruit, right? We get nice fruit. You get the radioactive fruit from South America or the States or whatever. You get a peach that's 3 times normal size, and you figure, how did they do that? You don't want to know, probably. I probably don't want to know in 20 years what kind of genetic type of changes are in that fruit. But the point I want to make is that that's how it was. It really was beautiful. The whole land was beautiful. The environment was beautiful. You felt aware and alert and clear. You knew what was what. We missed this. We don't get it. We don't understand it. And those people that are involved in this world more, for us who are learning Torah and trying to do our best that we can do, right? So we think we have it. We have nothing. We have a little taste of it. And thank God for that taste. And it's a beautiful taste. And we want more of that taste. But it's not the real thing. The Jew of history is much taller, much bigger. much more in touch with the Almighty than us. So what are we mourning for? That's what we're mourning for. We're mourning for that. What brought the loss? I'm just going to speak very quickly because of time, and I don't want to hold you longer than you should be held. I'm sure you're already over your concentration moment, but just for a couple minutes. What brought about this loss? I tried to tell you two ideas that I want to share. I could tell you the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa. Many of you know the story. I don't want to spend time. I just want to tell you that the smallness of a human being is the destruction of the world. Okay, so a 2-minute story, 1-minute story, quick vignette. Kamsa Bar Kamsa, this gentleman who's not named, we don't know his name, thankfully, has a big party. He invites his good friend, Bar Kamsa, but unfortunately, the person who he sends to invite brings, by mistake, not Kamsa, but Bar Kamsa. Sounds pretty close in name, but one of them is his best friend and one of them is his mortal enemy. That already is a problem. So it didn't mean that the Jewish people were perfect at the time of the temple. It means we still had problems and issues. It means that people still made mistakes. So the wrong person comes to the party, the wrong person is terribly embarrassed, and the host of the party says, "Get out of here. Leave. I didn't invite you. I don't want you here." "Oh, it could never happen to us." Yeah, it could. And anyone who thinks that this is a story that can happen, we all have terrible things happening to what we do. It's not about Kamsa Bar Kamsa for us, but we all in our own life live these realities. So the guy says, "Please, whatever you do, just don't embarrass me. Don't embarrass me. I'll pay for my meal. Just get out." I'll pay for half the, get out. Third time, "I'll pay for it all. I'll pay for the whole thing. Just don't embarrass me. Among the Chachamim, you got the leaders of the Jewish people, you got everyone here. Don't embarrass me. Get out." He forces him out. In fact, the Gemara tells us he grabs him, pulls him out. You can imagine, that's such a low level. And he sees as he's being pulled out, the rabbis are sitting there quietly, saying nothing. So it's okay by them. So I can be embarrassed like this. I want to die, I'm so embarrassed. And it's okay, they said nothing. The rabbis didn't know what to say. That's another discussion for another day. But it just comes to tell you that when there's imperfection, there's lots of it. He goes out and he says, "I've been rejected. Totally." And what do rejected people do? So this is our lesson for today. This is what I really want to tell you. I want to tell you what I want to tell you. That rejection is a bad poison. Okay? It's a terrible poison when you accidentally or on purpose reject people. He goes to the authorities. He says to Caesar, I think it was, I'm forgetting, I'm sorry, my brain's not working, I can read it. But he says to the head of the Romans, "Look, they're not going to accept your offer. They only take Jewish offerings." It is a patent lie, because Gentiles from all over the world bring offerings to the temple. But he knew what he was going to do. He's going to do a little slice in the membrane covering the conjunctiva of the eye, and a little slice here, a little slice there, bring the animal, and the sages are going to have an animal that, according to Jewish tradition, is not allowed to be offered. But what are they going to do? So it would seem logical to me, you call up the Romans and say, "I think someone tampered with your offering, could you bring another one?" I don't know, well, that's how I would have solved it, right? I would imagine, but that's not what could be done. Then this whole discussion, do we bring this animal to keep peace, even though it's a wrong animal, and that will be known for people that bend sometimes? Or do we not bring this animal, it's going to create a lack of peace, but we can't bend, God Almighty can't accept this offering. There's a whole discussion of a certain rabbi who was insistent and the other rabbis that were doubting. Let me tell you, mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. But what was the beginning? It was that the guy hated the other person. And you know, interesting, the Gemara, and the very end, the Romans see that the offering doesn't occur, and it's the beginning of the rebellion in their mind, and the war starts. Okay? What's the message? There's so many. Message of cruelty. We don't know this guy's name because he doesn't need a name. He stands for evil. But not for evil that we imagine is over there. Because, when we think of evil, we often think, Muslim threat, that's evil. Or our favorite politician south of the border that we hate, that's evil. No, we're talking about evil that starts within us. Not this evil that's way out over there somewhere. We're talking about the stuff that's in us. It's our evil. We're talking about our own hurt. We're talking about our own dealings with people that are less than optimal, for which we all have. Okay? That's what we're talking about. Sinas chinam. So that's one thing I want to raise. That's what brought about this loss. Okay? The second thing that brought about this loss is there had to be a Tisha B'Av and there had to be a day of suffering. I mentioned when we lose track of our closeness to God and we stop trusting God, God says, okay, you're going to cry for nothing, I'll give you something to cry for. I would make the point, or at least attempt to make the point, or suggest perhaps, that our generation is a little bit different. We did not have the closeness of the Dor Dea, of the generation who knew God intimately. We don't have that. We're living in a time of Hester Panim, of God's hidden face. So we're not seeing God every moment in a clear way. We struggle to have trust. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't. We should struggle and we should succeed at it. We should know that God created a universe, and He's creating a universe every moment for us. It's a beautiful thing. But it's still a struggle for us, so we're not necessarily in the same position. But to not trust the Almighty and to not be careful with other people are the major, major issues. Okay? And these are the things that we have to learn to fix, and that's what I want to discuss for the last minute or two. Just very, very quickly, one or two ideas to try and bolster these ideas that I've given you. Number one, the first temple was destroyed, 586, Nebuchadnezzar. How long did it take to get built, and what were the problems that caused it to be destroyed? The Gemara tells us that the Jews were making all kinds of mistakes with the fundamental, biggest of the sins, of idolatry, of adultery, of murder. They were doing it. Now, it doesn't mean everyone was doing it. That's not the point. It wasn't a society that fell apart in the same way that some societies, say in South America, live, that there's a lot of wanton violence. But the fact that there was any of it was a problem. It's a holy society. God didn't tolerate very much, doesn't tolerate very much in a holy society, mistakes that people make. Okay? But what do we see? People were respectful for one another. How long did it take for that temple to get rebuilt? 70 years. That's it. Second temple gets destroyed. Why? Because we were not good to one another. We didn't accord kindness to one another. Sinus chinam, which I'm going to explain in a minute. Causeless hatred. Hate without a cause. But I reassure you that if you hate someone, you'll find the cause. And it's still causeless hatred. Okay? How long did it take for that temple to get rebuilt? It didn't get rebuilt. I mean, there's a lesson that our teachers want us to learn. Okay? What it means to find ways in your mind to attack people's essence and goodness and find a way to find something bad about them. Okay? Now we've talked about these ideas before in the classes. I just want to reiterate them and then we'll finish. The issue of emunah, the issue of trusting that the Almighty will be good to us, it's certainly the time of the day to focus on positive. That the Almighty wants His children to come home. He really does. He doesn't want us to be out here in this exile forever. And He's going to accept less than perfect from us if we would change. So each one of us should try and change, because He's going to accept that change. He's going to accept our improvement. Sinus chinam is one of the major destructive forces, and it's so subtle that it bears one or two words of discussion before we finish. I hate this person because he stole from me. Maybe he stole, maybe he didn't. You hate him, you got a reason. Did he really steal from you? Maybe. Maybe he did. Maybe he's desperate. How do you know of his life? What do you know? What do you know about him? What do you know about his motivations? What do you know what makes that person tick to live? How do you know the inside of their life? What do we know about many people when we see people do things that we are not so happy with? And maybe we didn't even see it. Maybe we only think it happened. Put them down in our minds to make them smaller. Why do we have to make them smaller? As I believe as Rabbi Salanter said, that the kids, when you see kids fighting, you'll often see a kid deliberately pushing a kid down so that he can be taller and bigger. That's what we do. We're just grown-ups, so we do it more subtly. But the fact of the matter is, it's a travesty, it's a tragedy of the highest order that we have to make people smaller instead of making them bigger. The great Hasidic masters, right, would tell you, look in someone's eyes, look in their soul. Realize that you're looking at God when you look at a person. So you never should put someone down. You should never say not nice things to them. And I'm not in that chapter of not being perfect, but we all have to be aware at least. At least awareness is the start. That when you start to judge people and put them in a place, and you start to put them in a small place, and you start to make them into being small beings, and you start to say they don't deserve a place in this world, and no, I don't want to do for them, and they're not nice, and you start the stories going, and then someone tells you about that person, and you raise your eyebrows. You go, oh, right, you know. You're busy assassinating, you're shooting at them already. That's why we don't have a temple rebuilt, according to many of our teachers. Because we haven't begun to start to do what we would call avos chinam. And this is the finish of the discussion, really. The greatest force in this world is to find a reason to like somebody. And you don't start necessarily with the worst of people. You can start with nice people. but you have to take that to where it needs to go. There are people that you're going to definitely not be happy with. It's not possible to live a life and pretend to be in love with everybody. But you can find goodness about everybody. You just have to scratch harder. You didn't work hard enough. You didn't want to work hard enough. You didn't want to admit that that person is your family. It's your family member. It's your fellow Jew. You don't have to give it doesn't have to be your cousin for you to like them. So you have to find something to like about everyone. You have to find a reason. So when you need to protect yourself from damaging people, you should protect yourself. This is not the same thing as saying that you should stand in harm's way about people who are going to hurt you. That's not what I said. I said you should find ways and means of starting to like people for who they are, to find that essence that's positive, because every Jew has it. And this is the beginning of reparations. So I've gone a long way. I've talked about suffering. I've talked a little bit about individual suffering. I've talked about collective suffering. I've talked about why we suffer today in this day. And I've talked about really one of the major answers that our sages give us as to how to fix this day. I also suggested that we work on what caused Tisha B'Av in the first place. Tisha B'Av did not occur because of the sin of the spies. That was bad. It occurred because people cried for nothing. That's what the Torah tells us directly. And that we should learn. If there's anything to learn, that we shouldn't cry for nothing. We should learn what we should cry for, when we should cry, when shouldn't we cry, and when should we accept. Okay, we'll stop for today, and I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you.
You answered everything.
Don't think so. Don't think so. But if I left you with questions, that's a pretty good start. A good class should leave people with questions about where they should go and what they should do. I'm only talking to myself anyways, as you will. Okay, thank you everyone. So I hope the rest of the fast is good, and that it should be that we never, ever, ever have to fast again.
Amen.